The DJI Neo. Is it any good for FPV? Is it the easiest way to learn FPV in 2025? And should you buy it? I've had my Neo for about 6 months, flown quite a bit of FPV with it and crashed it a lot. So in this video, I'm gonna go over 11 pros and cons of the DJI Neo for FPV and take it for a quick flight and demonstrate how it actually performs. Let's go. The first pro of the DJI Neo is that it's extremely tough. Like, nearly impossible to break. I've crashed this thing a ton into all sorts of stuff, even got it all muddy, mud in the camera and everything, and it just keeps going. The only thing I've ever managed to break on this is one prop one time. Other than that, it's just been rock solid. I even made a video where I threw snowballs at it until I knocked it out of the air several times, and it just keeps going no matter what. Part of this is because it only weighs 135 grams, so it doesn't have a ton of mass when it slams into something to break parts of the drone. And so yeah, all in all, one of the toughest drones I have ever flown. Now, that doesn't mean that it's completely unbreakable. I have seen people online manage to break theirs, but for toughness and crash resistance, it gets an A+. The next pro of the DJI Neo is that it is super safe as well. Part of this is, again, because it's super light at only 135 grams, so if you crash it into something, it's a lot less likely to do damage. Plus, by default, it actually comes with 360-degree prop covers, so it's really hard for anything to get to the props. Now, it does perform better with these prop covers off, and that's how I fly it most of the time. But if you're flying it in super tight spaces or around people, those prop guards make it even safer. And to prove how safe it is, I've even flown it directly into myself. So yeah, just goes to show how tough this drone is. By the way, if you want to learn how to get the most cinematic shots with your drone, whether that's an FPV drone or a regular camera drone, I have a completely free 45-minute drone filmmaking training where I share my top 10 secrets to getting cinematic drone shots, covering everything from the best settings to composition to lighting to how to get smooth movements to editing your shots to color grading them and more. And again, that's completely free. Link is down in the description. Now back to the Neo. The third pro of the Neo is that it's super stable and easy to fly. Even in full manual mode, it's very tame and stable and doesn't just start getting all out of control super easily. It's even more stable than the Avata 2, which is already quite stable, which makes it great for learning to fly FPV. Now, this may not entirely prepare you for more powerful FPV drones that are a lot more zippy and a lot harder to control, but it does make it a lot easier to learn on than something really zippy like a full-blown 5-inch quad. The next pro of the Neo is that it is a completely integrated system. The batteries just pop out and go into a charger like regular camera drone batteries, so you don't have to worry about learning all about batteries and chargers, and they just automatically pair up to the goggles, whether that's these DJI Goggles 3 that I got with my Avata or the Goggles N3 that you can get with the Neo. It just all syncs together with the controller and remote really nicely, and you don't have to worry about learning all kinds of things about how to build drones and manage batteries and do a whole bunch of fancy tech stuff. You can just basically take this out of the box and start learning to fly. The next pro is that because this drone is so small and pretty stable, it's great for flying in tight spaces. As you'll see in a minute, when we're flying this drone, I can fit it into some pretty small spaces that I wouldn't even take my Avata 2 into, which makes it really fun to just go zipping around with, even in and out of the branches of trees. Just a super maneuverable drone that can get into really small spaces. The next pro of this drone is that it's pretty cheap. At only $200, it's cheap enough that it's not going to break the bank if you somehow do manage to crash or destroy it compared to larger drones like the Avata or even a regular FPV drone. And of course, you can also get DJI Care Refresh for it, which is pretty affordable since it's a cheap drone. And then if you break the drone, you can get a replacement for just $19, which is a great deal, especially considering that when you're learning FPV, there's a chance you still might be able to destroy one of these. And even though I have an Avata 2, I'll do things with this drone that I wouldn't do with the Avata 2 because it's cheaper and I can get a $20 replacement with DJI Care Refresh. It doesn't feel like so much of a loss if I break it, and so I'll take bigger risks and push the edges of my FPV skills more with this than I would with a more expensive drone, which is great for learning and improving your flying skills. And finally, the last pro of this drone is that it's fun. A lot of fun. I'll regularly just take this drone out to fly just to have a good time with it, and it's just absolutely great for that. It's not the fastest or most powerful or most cinematic drone in the world, but it's super fun to just go zipping in and out of tight spaces, flying around. It is just all in all a ton of fun to fly. So those are the pros of the DJI Neo for FPV. Now I'm going to take it up for a couple flights, demonstrate how well it actually does or doesn't do in FPV mode, and then we'll get to the cons, which some of them are pretty major, and I'll give you my thoughts on whether this is a good drone to learn FPV with or not. All right, and here we go. We're gonna start by taking off in sport mode. And we are going to then flip it into manual mode. Now there's a couple different ways that I like to fly the Neo. First one is zipping around kind of at the max speed that it can fly, which is going to be with around 30 degrees of gimbal tilt. As you can see, if we push it here, we can get it up to good 20 some miles an hour. And it's pretty zippy to fly around. It is a lot of fun. And yeah, you can just cruise with it pretty fast. It's actually quite agile. Now it doesn't have a ton of power. As you can see there, we kind of started to get low. Doesn't have the most punch out power. You just kind of have to be aware of that. But otherwise, it's really, really fun to fly. Now we do have a little bit of wind here. You can see fighting the wind, only getting 16-ish miles an hour. Oh, you saw there it dipped down if you turn too fast. Let's see if we can demonstrate this here. If you turn too quickly, like this, it will start to lose lift on one of the motors and it will almost fall out of the sky, and sometimes it actually does fall out of the sky if you turn too aggressively. Oh, there we go, you can see. Again, almost crashed. And once you get to know it a little bit, you can usually save it, but that is definitely something to keep in mind. But otherwise, it's really quite a lot of fun. As you can see, it's very nice and zippy. You can actually do a lot of really fun flying with it, even if it doesn't have a ton of power. Now, one area where it can struggle is diving things. So let's say we're going to kind of dive down this tall tree here, flip it over, cut the props, and then, oh, we barely pulled out of that dive without hitting the ground. I sort of know to pull out a little bit early, but when I was starting out, I had several times where I didn't pull out soon enough and actually did hit the ground. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And another thing that you'll notice when you're diving is that it actually doesn't cut the motors entirely. They're still spinning. Oh, and we went into a tree. Well, I guess I shouldn't talk while I'm trying to fly. But what that means is we get to test out how crash resistant it actually is and go recover the drone. So let's go. All right, so crashed over here somewhere. Anyway, what I was saying when we crashed is that it doesn't cut the motors entirely. Oh, the motors are still running on the drone. Well, I guess we gotta manually cut the motors here. There we go. And yeah, the drone is just fine. No damage on it at all. Ready to go flying again. So yeah, as I was saying, if you try to dive something, like here, let's try this tree, the motors don't entirely cut out. With a typical drone, when you cut the throttle, the motors will totally cut out. But with this drone, they keep running at a lot higher RPM than they would at a regular drone, kind of at an idle, so it doesn't quite behave the way you'd expect it to. Oh, there we go. And that's what sometimes happens when you're trying to pull out of a dive, because the motors just don't quite have enough power. So yeah, it's definitely not really for super aggressive stuff. So that's the first way that I like to fly the Neo. Then the second way is I'll tilt the gimbal tilt down to 13, 14-ish degrees. Here we've got it around there. And then that makes it so I can fly a lot slower and a lot more precisely. And I can just very, very precisely navigate in and out of obstacles, much more so than I really am able to even with my Avata. Maybe that's just a skill issue, but it lets me really fly in some pretty tight environments and just sneak through basically wherever I want to. I've even flown it going up into the woods here. Let's see if I can do this without crashing. It's a little bit hard with this lighting, but let's see what we can do here. Boom, there we go, right into the woods. As you can see, I'm going very, very slowly here, but as you can see, it's again super stable, and I'm able to navigate very, very precisely. Ooh. Okay, let's see if we can get out of here without crashing. Do have a little bit of wind, which is making it more difficult. And there we go, we are back out of the woods, all without crashing because of how stable the Neo is. It is just really great for being able to navigate these tighter spaces, just right in around these trees. Again, I wouldn't do this with the Avata just because it costs more if I crash it, and also it is, you know, it's a little bit bigger drone, it's better for faster flying. But with this drone, I can really get into those super, super tight spaces. Let's go right over here, down between these trees. This I honestly probably could do with the Avata. And then let's dive into this field here. This is a good example of what the Avata is not the best at. Oh, there we go. It started to flip. And I did crash most of the time in the beginning when it would do something like that because I wasn't used to it. Now I can catch it often. But yeah, just super fun for getting into tight spaces. And oops, we clipped the limb there, but we're still flying. All very nice. Of course, you're not going to be able to fly quite like this when you get started. I've been flying FPV for about a year with the Avata and the Neo. So this is definitely a skill that you learn over time. But I think the Neo actually makes it easier to do because of how stable it is and because it's a little bit less powerful. I think it's easier to learn how to do some of this really tight stuff with this drone than with the Avata 2. So I think that gives a pretty good demonstration of what you can do with this drone. Oh, ho! Well, that did not go according to plan exactly. All right, here the drone is. Again, as usual, just fine. No damage to it at all. Just got a leaf stuck on it, but otherwise all good to go. Again, this is a great example of why I like the Neo. I probably wouldn't do this with the Avata trying to fly through the greenhouse like this because number one, I don't want to damage anything, and number two, I don't want to break my Avata. But with the Neo, I'm not too worried that it will break because, as you see, it didn't. And also it's small and light enough, I knew it wouldn't damage anything. So yeah, super fun. I'm gonna actually try again to fly it here through the greenhouse because, well, that's just fun. Let's see here. We can pull this off. There we go. Oh, and we crashed again. So yeah, I got a little sendy there at the end with the wind and 15% battery and crashed a couple times, but as usual, the drone is just fine. And hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of how the Neo performs for FPV. But now it's time to get to the cons of the DJI Neo when you're flying FPV. So the first con is that it's kind of underpowered. You're not gonna be able to do just super, super aggressive acrobatics or crazy, crazy dives and pulling out of them like super close to the ground with the Neo. It's just not really built for that. It's actually not even primarily built as an FPV drone. It's built as a little automated follow me drone. So the motors aren't crazy powerful. And of course, it's just a small drone, so that is kind of expected to some degree. And the second con is kind of related to that in turns and recovering from dives, sometimes it will just like flip to the back or to the side, and that can cause you to crash. Now you saw that a couple times in our test flight, but it didn't actually cause us to crash because I've gotten pretty good at recovering from it. Now this can happen with other drones drones like the Avata 2, but it happens a lot more with the Neo and when you're flying a lot less aggressively than with something like the Avata. So definitely a downside of flying FPV with the Neo. Another issue that I've run into is that sometimes, especially after you will like clip a twig or something like that, you ran into something but you recovered and you're still flying just fine. Sometimes it will just do this really weird thing. Didn't do it in this flight, I'm not sure why, but it's done it to me a ton of different times, where it will just flip the gimbal up to basically vertical straight above the drone, which causes you to all of a sudden lose orientation of where the drone is. And I don't think I've ever been able to recover it from that. You just end up crashing into something. It's best to just go ahead and cut the props and let it drop somewhere, but that is definitely not ideal. And sometimes when you hit the pause button on the remote to get it to flip into GPS mode and hover, instead of just starting to hover in GPS mode like it should, it will just randomly start flying off in some direction and crash. That's happened to me a few times as well. I'm not sure what that is. That seems like a firmware bug like the gimbal flip issue. Also kind of a major downside, but again, this drone is super tough, and even in spite of all the crashes caused by that, it's still kicking. So I can't be too hard on it, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. And the next con is again something I touched on while we were flying. It doesn't fly exactly like a regular FPV drone. The biggest thing is when you cut your props on a regular drone, they'll go down to a really, really low idle, basically no power going to the motors. But on the DJI Neo, when you cut the props, they're still spinning a lot faster than on the Avata or on a regular camera drone. They still have more power going to them. So you don't get a complete power cut for dives, or even if you just want to drop the drone down to a lower altitude. So it doesn't respond entirely the same way as a regular FPV drone, which makes it not quite as ideal for learning to fly FPV with, but it will definitely give you the basic idea of how all the controls work, even if the feel isn't exactly the same, which it's not going to be quite the same between drones anyway, but it's more so with the Neo than with other FPV drones. And the last con, and maybe the biggest con of the Neo, is the camera quality. It's just not that great. I don't know how else to put it. I just don't really like the camera on this thing. The Avata 2 has a great camera. It looks basically like GoPro or whatever, but the camera quality on this thing is bad enough that I don't really feel like I could use it in any kind of professional setting where you want pro quality video, which has made me relegate it to basically just flying it for fun and not actually for shooting footage with it. Now, it does shoot 4K at up to 30 frames per second, but unfortunately the 4K is not very good quality, not very good dynamic range, tends to kind of be over sharpened. Now, you actually can go and turn down the sharpness in the goggles, which definitely does help, but all in all, just not the greatest quality camera. And because 4K is limited to 30 frames per second and the 30 frames per second feed to the goggles just isn't super smooth, I'll often bump it to 1080 at 60 frames per second when I'm flying, so I get a higher frame rate, smoother feed to the goggles, which makes it easier to fly, even though it is sacrificing some quality because I'm usually just flying for fun. So my final thoughts on the DJI Neo for FPV: is it a good way to learn FPV in 2025? And my answer would be yes and no. If you're not comfortable going straight to the Avata 2, it's a great way to get out of the simulator and start flying in real life and actually start getting that real world experience and have a ton of fun with it in the process. For that, I think it's great. It's super tough and durable. Really hard to destroy, which is a really good thing because when you're learning FPV, you are going to crash it a lot. And it's also not super expensive, so it's not a huge loss if you destroy one, especially if you have DJI Care Refresh on it. Now, as I mentioned, it's not a perfect analog to bigger FPV drones, but you definitely will get the hang of FPV flight controls with it, and you will have a lot of fun in the process. So for that use case, I definitely would recommend this. But if you really want to get deep into FPV drones, want to start building your own drones or getting custom pre-built drones and do FPV freestyle, blah, 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 this is probably not the best drone to get to learn on. You might as well just go ahead and get some kind of a pre-built drone or build your own if that's the route you want to go and learn with that, because this does have its limitations. Now, if you already fly FPV, let's say you have an Avata 2 or whatever, and you want to know if you should get this drone, I would say if you just want a little cheap drone to have fun with, it's a great great option. I would totally recommend it. I have the Avata 2 and I still fly this one a ton for fun. So yeah, gets a thumbs up for that use case. So that is my review of the DJI Neo for FPV in 2025. Again, if you want to learn how to get the most cinematic shots with your drone, I have a completely free 45-minute drone filmmaking training where I share my top 10 secrets to getting cinematic drone shots. Link to that is down in the description. Or if you want to go even deeper, I have an entire 12-hour drone filmmaking course where I go over every single part of my drone filmmaking process. Link to that is down in the description as well. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and we'll see you in the next one.